Good morning, everyone. And Gina Goetter, correct?
Yeah, that was the most interesting pronunciation of my last name.
Well, we're delighted to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm curious which came first. You both have dual titles. Did you start with COO, then become CFO, vice versa, or did you always start with this amalgamation of the two?
Well, so this is my second CFO gig. So my first one at Harley-Davidson, I was just the CFO. At Hasbro, it was scoped to be the CFO and the COO. So I stepped into the role right away. And the way that at Hasbro we define COO, it has supply chain, tech, all of procurement, all of analytics, and then, of course, everything that you would expect a CFO to have accountability for. But it was scoped. It was the first time I'd ever seen a job scope out of the gates for somebody that didn't know me or my experiences, like to have that scope come at me. That's frankly what made me super interested in the Hasbro role.
Yeah. For you.
Yeah, so I actually started as CFO 6.5 years ago. Block we have two parts of our business. One that serves small businesses with Square for commerce and payments, and one that serves consumers with Cash App, which is a mobile financial technology app. I started as CFO, and about 4 years in, added the COO duties. And as I've reflected on it, it's actually the second half of my career where I went deep on finance and learned that I'm incredibly data-oriented, analytical, want to derive insights from the numbers, want to think about a P&L or a balance sheet all the time. And that's what led me down the path of becoming a CFO. It's actually the first half of my career where I was much more of a generalist and started in strategy and corporate development, where I learned to, take a beginner's mindset to a new field that I think has served me as COO now. And to really ask the simple questions and then learn by continuing down that pursuit and that interrogation to get really deep on a new matter. I would also say that no COO role is alike. So my COO role is probably very different from
31
yours.
different flavors.
Exactly. And really it's about, kind of learning in ways that, that support the CEO and the rest of the management team across whatever discipline. For me, it's our foundational teams. It's our G&A teams. So it's, in addition to finance, it's people, counsel, comms policy, and I'm also the chair of our bank, Square Financial Services.
Well, as Diane alluded to in the intro to this session, there is this trend where more companies are merging the two roles together and creating this unique hybrid title. Why do you think that is? What is so advantageous about owning both roles?
Well, I'm going to pick up where you left. I mean, so I grew up at General Mills, and the way that finance was seen at General Mills was very much an operator. So everyone hears FP&A. That we didn't really use that term at General Mills. We used financial operations, and so I was kind of born and bred into this mindset that every operational decision is linked to a financial. Like they just go hand in hand. And so at Hasbro, it's the same way. When you're working with a company that is manufacturing product, that is making real cost decisions, real investment decisions, there is no path that isn't either operational or financial. So it's very blended. You can't do one without the other. And I find combining them actually creates a lot of simplicity across the organization. It's a few less silos that you have to go through and build bridges with when it kind of all is coming up to one leader or one decision maker. It allows for some quicker decisions.
I've always felt as a CFO and now also as a COO that you're a language builder for the company. You're a connector for the company. Mm-hmm. Setting the terminology, the tools, and the frameworks by which the company runs. So as a CFO, that's our investment framework, which for Block is to be a Rule of 40 company, composition of growth and margin. As the lead of our counsel team, it's setting the risk management framework for the company. As the lead of our people team, it's setting the performance management framework or pay for performance framework for the company. These are ways by which we understand how we operate and how our teams align ultimately.
Yeah. How do you prioritize cost discipline with operational skill, especially when they might seem to be competing or pulling you in two different directions? And how often does that occur? Maybe we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tension in the role is aspiration and discipline. as a CFO. You have a giant aspiration for all the things that the company can do, but you need to be responsible in holding yourself accountable to delivering on that through the investments that you make and the returns that you see from those investments. I've always said as a CFO, you need to wear two hats. One is the business advocate, the sponsor of the roadmap, moving as quickly as you possibly can. But then the other hat is fiduciary duty to the company, which is capital allocation across all the bets that you could have on your roadmap, and a check and balance to the business. And I think the same is true for the COO role. You have to hold both, enabling the business to move as quickly as possible, but also as responsibly as possible.
Yeah, that enablement is a big word. I see the CFO, or really finance, I always bristle when people characterize finance as the no people, or the red tape before we're able to achieve everyone's hopes and dreams. So I see.
You bristle why?
I just don't think that's a fair characterization of either myself or what I expect of my team. I expect finance to enable the strategies of the business through that lens of here's where we're trying to go, near term, long term, and what are all the thoughtful and responsible, pragmatic steps that we can take to get there. We want to build the business versus being a limiter to the business. And I think being able to wear both hats, I frankly don't really see a ton of conflict of, in this decision I have to think like a CFO, and in this decision I have to see like a COO. They're so blended together that it actually makes it quite easy to kind of flip back and forth. And as a CFO, you have the vantage point of the entirety of the strategy, the entirety of the company. You know how one side of the business, what is important there versus the other side. And so you're using your word of connector. You're one of the few individuals that can connect all of the pieces together in the strategy and then the execution of that strategy. It becomes quite a powerful kind of ability to move quickly. Yeah.
I'm going to pivot soon to talk about the specifics of each of your respective companies with some granularity. But I am first curious how you structure the teams under you to reflect these cross-functional roles, especially for someone like you who's overseeing legal and people and finance, wide remit.
Yeah.
You're probably context switching throughout the day, throughout the week.
That is the hardest part of my job, is the context switching. But by the way, that's the funnest part of the job for someone who wants to learn and continually be seeing opportunities that are new. So we have discipline experts across each of these functions. We have a head of people, we have a head of legal, we have a head of comms, we have a head of our bank. They report into me. And then I have a number of discipline leads across finance as well. My role is to ask the simple question. My role is to probe. My role is to connect the dots across disparate areas of the business because I have a purview over them. And my role is to cultivate talent that can thrive in that environment.
Yeah, talent is key, having the right leaders in those positions. We talk, and we use the word a lot, my expectation is people are co-pilots to the business. So across all of my functions that report to me, we are all enablers. We're not the P&L owners per se. And so the kind of the mindset that I've instilled in all of my directs is that we are here to co-pilot the business. And that just has become kind of an ethos of how we, structure ourselves within how we operate.
I quickly want to check with the audience. Raise your hand if you hold a dual COO role. I'm just curious. Raise your hand. Okay, so a good number of people. Anyone here actually interested in getting a second role to go along with your COO role? Okay, so there are some people. Does that surprise you? Did you expect more? Did you expect less? About right?
Yeah.
Say so? Okay. Well, I'd love to, again, get into this with more granularity because you talk about the fact that, yes, you wear both hats. However, you're not necessarily going from one side to the other. It's this enmeshment of the two. Can you give a real-world example of a moment or a scenario when wearing both hats accelerated decision-making or a strategic outcome? Kind of walk us through that.
I mean, one that immediately comes to mind is AI. So we are automating Block. We're automating our company internally now. And that means not only automating the customer experience, a small business or a consumer managing their financial livelihood, but also automating how we run the company. Mm-hmm. And so we're using some shared platforms and infrastructure that will help us not only automate, for instance, contract work for our legal team, but also treasury movement or forecast and planning for our finance and strategy team. And being able to see those connections and support those teams as we work through that digital transformation for the company, but also using new technologies like generative AI and technology that we built internally as well, an open source technology called Codename Goose, which helps the interface for how we interrogate all of the data that we have at Block, is something that I think, because our teams are together in a shared group, we have a better way to help share those stories and share the infrastructure across our teams.
I'm curious to hear your answer. Before she does answer, I will be turning to the audience for questions, so do keep that in mind.
So you're on notice, is basically what that was. I'm going to point to the recent few months and dealing with all of the tariff and the macro uncertainty that's gone along with it. You know, as context for Hasbro, I wasn't there during COVID, but it was a company that wasn't running in a super disciplined way as it came to some of the core operational processes. And I walked into a situation where we had way too many, I just would envision warehouses coming to life like Toy Story, just given the number of action figures we had. We had way too much inventory. And we spent the past couple of years getting our processes up to kind of standard and really cleaning up our balance sheet and cleaning up the inventory.
What does that mean in practice?
It means we wrote off a lot of inventory,
Okay.
is what that means.
Yeah.
And so heading into a tariff environment and just a lot of the same flavors that came with COVID, sitting in the chair of both dual CFO and COO, I needed to figure out how do we make sure that we're taking decisions and allowing the company to run, but not getting ourselves back into a situation where we were coming out of COVID, where we were sitting on a lot of the wrong inventory in a lot of the wrong places around the world. And so the way that we've set up how we approach tariffs, grounded in fact, we're avoiding analysis paralysis, taking a lot of no regret decision making, but allows me to have a vantage point of both sides. Operationally, how are we managing all of our suppliers, the logistics networks, how are we managing all of the interrelationships with our customers, and I'm able to balance that with what is that going to mean for us financially? What is it that I'm going to have to report at the end of every quarter, at the end of the year, of how we perform, not only from a P&L standpoint, but from a balance sheet standpoint? And able to, you know, in this dynamic right now, keeping both of those sides balanced, I'm confident that we're not going to be in the same position we were coming out of COVID, where we were sitting with action figures all over the world. Yeah.
Let me turn to the audience. Raise your hand if you have a question. Our mic handler will come to you. Any questions? Speak now. All right, well, I have many more questions. Gina, you said to me that every decision is made with the underlying understanding that Hasbro has to be alive and just thriving for years to come. And so I'm curious how you balance that long view with some of the short-term pressures of tariff volatility, for instance, as you already referenced, but also quarterly performance and all that comes with that.
Yeah, again, the learning that we had from COVID, that all of us had from COVID, is companies are going to exist on the other side of this. We will adapt, we will remain agile, and we will figure out a way to keep running and keeping viable. So that's been our mantra, is we will be still selling toys on the other side of this. Now we just need to figure out how to make them profitably, distribute them profitably, et cetera. So it's never been a discussion of how do we shut off one part of our business. It's been more of, all right, this is the new reality. How do we now structure our business and take decisions accordingly? The journey that we had been on, you know, Hasbro's been on a multi-year transformation journey. We're kind of midway through. So some of the moves that we're making now were in the pipeline. We were just going to spread them out over the next 2 to 3 years. With what's happening just, you know, globally, it's all right, which are the ones that we can accelerate forward faster that we're not going to regret making? And the ones that are a little bit gnarlier, that depending on where things net out, you could go one way or you could go the other way, we're kind of pushing those until we have a little bit more clarity. In terms of like managing the investment cycle, I kind of run from a motto of transparency is key, and I try to break it down very simply, very transparently for all my stakeholders, board, management team, and the investment community, employees, et cetera. Yeah, it's the simple and transparent communication, I think, wins the day.
Yeah. Amrita, over to you. I'm curious how you prioritize growth bets across a pretty sprawling ecosystem. I mean, Block has Cash App, Square, Tidal, TBD. I mean, how do you figure out where growth should come from next?
Yeah, this really comes down to our investment framework, which is Rule of 40. It helps neutralize across businesses that may be more established and higher margin but lower growth, or businesses that are more nascent and higher growth but lower, not yet at the margin scale. And it helps us sort of hold ourselves accountable to, if we're making an investment in a particular business this year, we expect to see within a defined window of time the returns on that investment. I think the other key thing that we think about is unit economics. We work in financial services at a very dynamic time from a macro environment perspective. We want each of our products to be able to stand on their own two legs from a unit economics standpoint. And so we will be in testing for quite a bit of time when we start something new to ensure that we can get to positive unit economics and then eventually scale it. And then what's interesting is that we call our business an ecosystem because one product may actually impact another product. And what's interesting about Block is that we sit at the counter, basically. Between a buyer with Cash App, we have 57 million monthly actives on Cash App, and the millions of sellers that we serve with Square. And so supporting the growth in one ecosystem actually potentially benefits the growth of another part of our business. And so we've got to think not only on the individual side, but also at the collective whole as we bring them together, which we think is fairly unique for our business.
Well, to your point, Block is scaling, in a high growth, but also high regulation space. What keeps you up at night?
I mean, look, every single day is different with respect to policies that come out or regulations or enforcements, et cetera. The key thing that we focus on is doing right by the customer.
Sure.
If we believe that we are presenting our services in as simple and transparent and fair a way as possible that expands access, our purpose is economic empowerment, bringing people into the economy. Ultimately, doing right by our customer will put us on the right side of whatever regulatory landscape we're in.
The COO role, I mean, the way I look at it, it's already the Swiss Army knife of roles. Then you layer on finance chief on top of all of that. How do you ensure that you have a very clear swim lane and directive, and also ensure that it doesn't become kind of this dumping ground for everything falls under them if it doesn't fit neatly elsewhere in the company?
Well, that happens sometimes.
It does happen. There's no prevention.
That can happen sometimes. We leverage what we call OGSMs across the organization, and we do them at the executive team level. So every executive member has, here's what I'm trying to accomplish and how I'm going to measure myself in the year. And we work on them together to make sure that there is no overlap, so there isn't that dumping ground philosophy. But the role of the COO, at least at Hasbro, it's the undercurrent for how we're running the company. So even if there's something in one of my colleagues' purviews that rolls up directly to him, but it's impacting how we run the company, it's impacting efficiency, our employees, how we treat our customers, that becomes part of my remit to solve. So it isn't a perfect black and white answer. It tends to be a little bit blurry.
Or more nuanced.
Yeah.
One of the most important things that a leadership team can do is create clarity around accountability and responsibility. Yeah. And so Block's framework, it's interesting to hear your three-letter term.
Everyone has the
Everyone has one. Ours is DRRi, which is directly responsible individual. Yeah. And the person who's the DRRi of a particular initiative may not have all those people reporting to them, by the way. They may be working cross-functionally, but they are ultimately the one on task for delivering progress and reporting out on that progress and aligning teams against that. And so I am thankfully not the DRRi of everything at the company. I'm the DRRi for portions of it, and we have other DRRis on my team or on other people's teams, and that's really how the company has to function.
Very, very quickly, let's end with a spicy question. If you had to get rid of one title, CFO or COO, which would you part ways with and why? You got to pick one.
You have to?
You have to pick one. Don't try and run out the clock.
I'll give you my, I'm going to give you my non-answer.
Okay.
which is, we call the teams that I look after are foundational teams across the full purview of, again, legal, people, finance, et cetera. So I will keep my CFO title because I am Chief Foundational Officer.
There we go. And for you, very quickly.
I would say the CFO is a COO, so I would keep the CFO title.
Fair enough. Thank you both. Such a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.